what is the focus and what are the impacts that we intend to have with this board or commission. And a last thing that we kind of talked about was, what factors should be kept in mind when we start selecting or thinking about the selection of the membership of this body. A couple of notes here. Generally speaking, the LRC seemed to have landed on a Human Relations Commission as a name. I think there was some consensus around that. Additionally, I think there was some consensus around having an advisory committee at the beginning, at least, opposed to having quasi-judicial. I know that some members wanted to be a little more informed through the presentations that we're going to have today, but generally speaking, that was the consensus that we came to. We had a quick discussion around engagement. So staff will post a summary of the first 3 meetings after the 3rd meeting, and then subsequently a summary for each meeting afterwards. So there'll be a total of 3 summaries of the LRC. And then we will either post them on the front page of the ACC Gov website or on the Inclusion Office website, or both. We can talk more about that. We just had a brief discussion about that. So today's presentation is going to go as follows. First, we're going to have the City of Raleigh present to us. Then we're going to have the City of Atlanta present to us. Then we're going to have the City of Asheville present to us. And subsequently, we will have Buncombe County present to us as well. So it's also important to note that Asheville is actually within Buncombe County. LRC members have the 3 predetermined questions. However you all want to ask those questions will be totally up to you. City of Raleigh is aware, as are all of the presenters, that these 3 questions will be coming. We ask that if you have follow-up questions that are not answered during the presentations, please put those in the chat, and we'll ask Crystal to kind of coordinate getting those follow-up questions out there after the presentation is concluded. So that being said, I will turn it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much, Assistant Manager Jones. And we want to say thank you to everyone, including our elected officials, to everyone in the manager's office, and to the people throughout localities who have been willing to have, in many instances, not just one, but multiple conversations with the Inclusion Office heading into this process. And the City of Raleigh is one such locality that on a really quick turnaround was willing to say yes and willing to share some details about the work that's happening there with respect to their Human Rights Commission. Just one quick note as we head into this presentation. We're going to hear from, in the following sequence, we're going to hear from Raleigh, then Atlanta, then Asheville. Buncombe County is actually going to be speaking briefly about their non-discrimination ordinance, because a few commissioners during our last meeting sort of were asking questions about the non-discrimination ordinance and what next steps might be. And so we were able to arrange to have Buncombe County attend. We will ask the same 3 questions to Raleigh, Atlanta, and Asheville. And then we have a separate set of questions that we've prepared for Buncombe County. So Travis, if you'd be willing to introduce yourself and dive in. Travis is going to do a brief presentation, and then we'll go through a couple of questions.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Is everyone able to see my screen? Fantastic. Good afternoon. My name is Travis Mccullum, and I serve as a community relations analyst with the City of Raleigh, North Carolina. And I appreciate the commission members being here today to just learn a little bit more about the work of our Human Relations Commission, its function, and the role that the City of Raleigh plays in working with our Human Relations Commission. And I'm hoping that, that everyone is able to learn something about kind of our operations and how we approach all of this today. So, again, we're going to talk a little bit, hopefully, about the background of our Human Relations Commission, really just some current practices in Raleigh. We really want to highlight some of the board's accomplishments. And then last but not least, just talk about very briefly opportunities that we're looking at for enhancing our Human Relations Commission, but also some current initiatives. And, in preparation for the questions, just making sure that everyone is aware of the history of the HRC, just kind of how we're evaluating the scope, and then last but not least, a little bit about how we decide on who our commissioners are and what the application process looks like. So when we're talking about the City of Raleigh HRC, It is a entity or a group that works directly with the City of Raleigh's Department of Equity and Inclusion, which is the department which I represent. It's just very briefly about our department. We have grown in the last 2 years from a group of 4 folks who you see on the screen to a staff of 8 full-time staff. We are currently rehiring our executive director position right now, but nonetheless, we work directly with all of our boards and commissions, and we serve as a liaison to our boards. Ultimately, we provide guidance, suggestions, and direction to the boards based on City Council's guidance, as well as using kind of current human relations issue as a guideline, and then also City of Raleigh policies as a guideline as well in the guidance that we provide our boards and commissions. So when we're talking about, what is human relations as defined by the City of Raleigh, we're really thinking of, this work that aims to help communities become more harmonious, respectful, cohesive, and also to safeguard against discriminatory acts. And we'll talk some more about some of the training initiatives and such that the city is working on with our commissioners a little bit later. So I want to take a minute and really just kind of unpack the history of the board, because our board's history goes back some time. So, during the 1950s, we see this early rise in the feminist movement, the peace movement, the civil rights movement, and as a result of this is all as a result of disparities in housing and education, economic conditions, tense community policing relations, and so on. And because of this, by the 60s, these groups that are kind of starting to discover these challenges in the 50s begin to collectively organize in hope of creating this more equitable society. But even though it takes some time, communities across the country, specifically cities and municipalities, see this need for human relations commissions to be established. So that leads us to the city's timeline. So in 1963, Governor Sanford created the North Carolina Good Neighborhood Council. By 64, 55 North Carolina localities had created councils. By 1971, the state had changed the name to the North Carolina Human Relations Council, which still exists. But then in 1977, the City of Raleigh issued an ordinance that established the Raleigh Human Relations Commission. So again, it's just understanding that our Human Relations Commission dates as far back as 1977, when Mayor Giles Coggin and the council at that time established the ordinance that would create our commission. So when we're talking about the Raleigh Human Relations Commission's mission, we're really talking about a group that is designed to ensure fairness and justice in the way that people are treated, and that everyone has a right to live and work in a safe and healthy community. The intent of our commission is to advise council. So I heard this piece earlier about the quasi-judicial piece versus the advisory council. We are an advisory council. Our council is advisory in nature, and they are designed to educate and support the most impacted communities in the city of Raleigh. I think about protected classes of the elderly, youth, persons with disabilities, while they also work to promote racial unity and celebrate ethnic diversity as well. So some key activities that our council participates in, or, our commission works with, is the Mayor's Unity Day, which is an event that's hosted annually by the commission to promote unity in the city of Raleigh, where one ethnic group is highlighted. The Human Relations Awards, the Social Equity Book Club, where we are really just kind of educating the community. That's a partnership with our office. And then last but not least, the Human Relations grants, where over $500,000 are issued on an annual basis, where our Human Relations Commission helps manage the execution of those grants and determining which agencies will receive that city funding. When we're talking about the board's responsibilities, we really just highlight the fact that they're expected to be present for at least 80% of their meetings. They do attend and present on behalf of commission during city council meetings as well. One thing that is important about the scope of our board is we like the scope to be evaluated on an annual basis. So there's a retreat that occurs annually where the board assesses what they did in the previous year, and then they look at the work that they'll do in the year to come. And then ultimately they arrive at a consensus where they decide what their new work plan is going to be. They present that before council, and that work plan is not executed until our council approves of it. So that's a little bit about the checks and balance piece with our commission. And then, but last but not least, they're certainly participating in community events and sponsored forums as well. So when we're talking about the experience and the skill set that we're looking for in, our boards and commission members, we want to make sure that there's inclusive representation. The bylaws call for at least one person who's under the age of 21 years old. That's a vacancy that we're working to fill. But we also consider things like gender and ethnicity, but we also consider skill set as well. I think of the commission now and the professional experience of our commission. It expands from business and marketing professionals to social workers, to lawyers, to public health officials, child care officials. So really, it's just understanding that our board is eclectic, because as a human relations commission, the expectation is that that commission is going to be reflective of the community. So it's a diverse board. Currently, the commission has 13 seats. That is what council has called for. Of those 13, 11 are filled, but we are still actively working to fill 2 of those seats. Again, one of those is that youth seat for someone who is under the age of 21. So I'm going to very briefly conclude this portion with just kind of sharing some recent and upcoming initiatives, because I think it's important for you to have a snapshot of what our commission is working on. So again, we're working on filling those positions and vacancies, really putting this emphasis on finding AAPI representation, Asian American Pacific Islander applicants for the commission, advising council concerning troubling street names. Right now, our commission is undertaking an African American History Project where they are going to go before council hopefully later this year and just kind of give some recommendations to council regarding some street names that are problematic with problematic terms. We are working with the State Human Relations Commission to train our boards and commissions on hate crime laws and policy. Just taking all of our commission members through an Equity 101 course that our department offers that we've rolled out to all of our employees. And then really the last thing I'll highlight, there are others on the screen, but we are working right now via the American Rescue Plan. The city of Raleigh was awarded $1 million in grants for local funding for human service agencies, and our city council determined that our Human Relations Commission would play a similar role that they play with our annual human service grants, and also help with determining organizations that would be best to grant this funding to serve marginalized and underserved populations in our community. So I hope that provides a very brief and clear snapshot of what our Human Relations Commission does. I could talk at great length about it, but out of respect for time and making sure that we leave space for questions and make space for others, I think that concludes my comments at this time. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen just as soon as I can open this up.
Charles, we have to say thank you to you, and to be very clear. Travis was briefed by us on our time constraints today, and so if it felt like he was moving quickly, it truly is him being as considerate as he possibly could be to present all of that information in a really short span of time. So we appreciate that. Travis, you have largely touched on the 3 questions in your presentation, but I'm just going to ask them really briefly in case there's some really powerful nuggets that you know we need to take away. So the first one is, what impact has the HRC had in your community?
That's a great question. So I will add this caveat and share, and Crystal knows this. I have been working with our department now. We have been working with the city for some time, but have been working with our department for about 4.5 months now. But just in 4.5 months, I can name from the Social Equity Book Club to a local book bag giveaway that they did where they served 100 children, to really building some cultural competency and awareness around AAPI issues and concerns with, just some of the challenge that community has faced in the last 2 years. I think that the impact that they have is widespread, and I think that it's of great magnitude just because of the scope of the commission, being this commission that really seeks and sets out to impact the lives of all of these residents in the city of Raleigh. And, again, we're still working on this grants piece, which is going to have a tremendous influence and impact as well. But I think that really just when given the opportunity, the commission, because of its scope, because of its focus, because of the consistent reevaluation of just what they're working on in a given year, there's a real meaningful opportunity for them to impact multiple communities. One last thing that I would share is we talk a little bit more about our other boards and commissions when we have more time to talk through the presentation. One thing that I would share is when we're looking at our department, we oversee 7, likely soon to be 8 boards and commissions. And when I think about the Human Relations Commission, I think about this notion of intersectionality. So much of the issues that they tackle ends up being, these issues that our other boards and commissions tackle. And when we're looking at the ordinance that's in place that protects our Human Relations Commission and really calls for its establishment, the other boards and commissions that have come on board and online over the years have been really a direct product of the work of our Human Relations Commission. So if we look at Police Advisory Board, we look at Hispanic and Immigrant Affairs, we look at persons with disabilities, these all in some way, shape, or form manifest themselves out of the work of the Human Relations Commission, which I think really does speak to that legacy and the impact they've had.
Thank you, Travis. And within your team, and if you can mention the amount of people that are on your team, how do you as a team evaluate the progress of your HRC?
Absolutely. So specific to the HRC, so with that org chart earlier, one thing I will share is that there are 3 people currently who are kind of facilitating the work of all of those boards and commissions. We are growing certainly in the plans for us to have more staff. But right now, each board and commission has a designated liaison. So I am the designated liaison for the Human Relations Commission. And to answer that question regarding kind of how we evaluate the scope and assess their work, I think that on an annual basis, the importance of the retreat, I think, cannot be understated. When they come together on an annual basis, they normally take, like I said, approximately probably anywhere between 8 to 9 hours where they come together and they reassess what worked well in the previous year, but then they really take some time to heed the guidance of our staff and our department, our expertise regarding just kind of what are some meaningful issues that we are seeing that the residents of Raleigh are encountering. And with that said, I think that in large part kind of does help them assess and evaluate the work that they're doing in the given year and the year that will approach. So I think that the work plan, a couple of other things I would add, they do meet on a monthly basis, but in addition to the monthly meeting, there's also a monthly leadership meeting where I have the pleasure of meeting with both the co-chairs, the secretary, sometimes there are individual committee chairs that we have meetings with. So I think, the way that you assess these, the work that they're doing is really just remaining engaged and having full-time staff that are able to engage with them and really just kind of hear their concerns and their thoughts on the work that they're doing.
Crystal, real quick, if I could add something or ask a question, Travis, how often do you all report to City Council?
That is a great question. So per my understanding, the commission reports to City Council on a biannual basis. So it's the expectation is that shortly after that work plan is completed, they will report to council, and then there will be another report out to council about 6 months after that. And that's typically the chair of the commission who carries out that communication.
And Travis, the development of that work plan, does that happen during the annual retreat? Is that when that's put together?
Yes, but what's interesting about that is that process is one that goes beyond just those 8 or 9 hours. I would say that the core principles and concepts that are going to ultimately develop into the work plan or developed at that time, but really it's a process that ends up taking multiple weeks thereafter in terms of the creation of that work plan.
And this is the last question before we complete our sprint together. So what are some of the factors that you consider in the selection process? And one of our commissioners has also asked a helpful follow-up question. What steps are you taking to ensure that there is diversity throughout that selection process?
Absolutely. What I would share is that in terms of the selection process, that is a process that our council is very involved with. So, ultimately, the commissioners that are elected for any of our boards and commissions, HRC being no exception, are at the discretion of council. So while there is an application process and, folks in the community are able to apply, ultimately those applications are vetted. And once those applications are vetted by, our administrative team, they do go before council. And from that point, council makes a determination as to whether or not someone is a commissioner or they're not a commissioner. And I think that being that, our organizational values call for, that diversity, that equal representation, and the scope of the board, our council is very aware of that because there's this long-seated history with us having this Human Relations Commission. So I think that our council is very, very sensitive to that idea that you all express, and in their selections, it's reflected.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Myers, did that answer your question?
I guess in terms of let's put it this way. I assume you all have people for these positions. Do you have any, for the applicants who are applying for, do you have enough diversity in who applies for the positions to be able to have your commission pick a diverse group?
It's a great question. To my awareness and to the extent of my knowledge, yes, I think that, because of Raleigh's demographics and because the scope of the work of the commission, we tend to have very diverse representation. When I'm thinking across all of those lines right now, from gender to, ethnicity, orientation, at this point on our commission, it is very diverse. However, there may have been times, in the past, or there may have been a history of that being a challenge, but to my awareness, it's always been a very diverse board with very diverse applicants. I also know that, again, our council is very intentional about sharing the work that the Human Relations Commission does and making it, kind of I would say our Human Relations Commission is at the forefront of a lot of boards and commissions. And for that reason, I think the public has a good idea of what they do. So for that reason, we do get a very diverse applicant pool. But again, the history of that, I'm not entirely sure of, being that the commission dates back to 1977. It's a great question.
Well, Travis,
thank you so much.
Sorry, Crystal.
No,
I just
okay.
want to say thank you. And if you'll give the capital city my love, and also, Demetrius, Lakeisha, and Maria, make sure you tell them I said hello.
Absolutely. I will be sure to pass that on.
Thank you,
Thank
Travis.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. Sonia, thank you so much for logging on. For our elected officials, part of what we've done is we've reached out to each locality and we've asked them to hop on about 10 minutes in advance. Sonia is the administrator from Atlanta, who, full disclosure, the first time we spoke with Atlanta was actually last year. And Sonia was kind enough to connect again with us this year, and now is here to engage in a live one-on-one conversation where we will tackle the 3 questions we've identified. How are you doing, Sonia?
I'm doing wonderful. And yourself?
Doing okay. Thanks again
Great.
for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely. My pleasure to do so.
Sonia, so we have the 3 questions that I know we've discussed briefly in advance. But for the first question, who created Atlanta's Human Relations Commission? And what impact has it had within Atlanta?
So first, let me just say good afternoon. And I certainly appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to share our insight. The creation of the HRC for the city of Atlanta was an agreement between Atlanta City Council and legislation and the mayor. And they agreed upon and founded the HRC Commission in year 2000, and that was during Mayor Bill Campbell's election. I've been with the city of Atlanta since 2010 for 11 years, and I was actually assigned the administrative responsibilities in 2016. So I've had that responsibility for 5 years now. I truly believe the impact that it has had on our community. I believe it provided our constituents strength in our ability to unite people of different backgrounds and beliefs and cultures around common principles, in essence, respect and well-being. And from my experience connecting with constituents, I have seen a sense of belonging and inclusion. It puts an emphasis on individuals' peace and their safety, which is important to thrive in a community.
Sonia. And Sonia, is your HRC more advisory or is it more quasi-judicial?
Advisory.
Okay. So does your body go through the process of reviewing individual complaints?
We do, and that process is with filing a complaint and giving that to the Office of Constituent Services. And I receive those complaints and review them. I do that initial investigation, and we make sure that the constituent understands the processes clearly, which is very important. And as you and I have spoken in the past, I have re-emphasized on several occasions the importance of even your administrative staff, those people that are taking in the information, the complaint, and doing the initial investigation with the alleged offender. That communication is vitally important and the person chosen to do so.
Thank you, Sonia. Sonia, how do you evaluate progress with respect to your HRC? And how do you assess whether or not the scope needs to change?
First is truly knowing and seeing the confirmation and responsiveness from the community and knowing that they are aware that the Human Relations Commission exists. Our commission went to great lengths and detail to educate the community about the Human Relations Commission. Our previous chair, Rabbi Josh Lesser, he wrote, produced, and edited a brochure that was distributed to all of City Council to distribute within their NPU meetings in hopes of reaching and teaching the public. And coordinating and promoting the mission and awareness of the HRC throughout the departments within our city was imperative for knowledge and growth. We ensure orientation and support the understanding of what's required to serve on the HRC and the requirements of any commission for all their new appointees. Again, that's something that I have shared with you in the past, how relevant and important it is for them to know the requirements of the commission. The responsiveness from the community and the complaints filed, it shines a light and is an important role on evaluating discrimination experiences. Based upon those facts and the number of complaints that I've received establishes a review of any unnecessary or necessary changes that have taken place in the past. They're reviewed by the commissioners, and based upon those facts and the actual complaints that have been filed is how we go about making change. Keep in mind, each case is based upon a personal experience, and that impacts the process in which we put into place to thoroughly investigate the complaint. One thing that's very important is establishing guidelines for filing a complaint, and it's an imperative for progress and resolution.
And so for our last question, what are some of the factors that are considered in selecting HRC members in Atlanta?
Okay. Well, we make certain that the commission seats remain full and that all appointments and confirmations are executed in a timely fashion. The HRC consists of 7 commissioners. 2 commissioners are appointed by the mayor, and 2 commissioners are appointed by the president of City Council, and 3 are elected by the at-large members of the City Council, and each commissioner must reside in the city of Atlanta. They comprise the commission with members that reflect the diversity of our city, including a balance of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, age, and disability. Attention to this should be in alignment with administration's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you so much, Sonia. We really appreciate it. To any of our elected officials, do you have any follow-up questions that you would like to share?
That covered what I wanted to know. Of course, I might have more questions later. So, Sonia, I appreciate your time and helping us understand more about your HRC.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Okay. I believe that Brenda, I saw you hop on. Are you still here? Hello. Okay. So along with Sonia and Travis, Brenda is yet another local government public servant who is willing at the drop of a hat to make time to connect with us today. Brenda is currently, I believe, the interim equity and inclusion officer in Asheville. And similar to Travis and Sonia, had multiple conversations with the inclusion office leading up to today. Brenda, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's going to be good practice for me. I'm kind of new at this, y'all. So I actually have the advantage that I was here when we informed everything. Some of my facts might be a little off, but we'll do our best to answer your questions and get there.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So for the first of 3 questions, who created the HRC in Asheville and what impact has it had in your community?
The HRCA was the brainchild of one of our city council members, who no longer is a city council member, but he really pushed for that in 2016. So out of that, I know our equity officer was hired in 2017. She began in late July of 2017. The Blue Ribbon Committee was already established that would work on setting up the protocol for the Human Relations Commission, and that was brought to City Council for approval. And the impact, boards and commissions that tend to be advisory don't have as much impact as, say, a quasi-judicial board that has specific roles and decisions that they have to make, right? Ultimately, council makes the final decision on all matters of governing of our city. But this is basically an advisory board. There hasn't been a lot of connection with the community as yet. There has been, I'm not going to say significant turnover, but there's constant turnover. And part of that in an advisory board, if I could just lend some, lessons learned. I've been in government 31 and a half years, so I've kind of seen it almost all of it, is that you consider who you're putting on. Now, their criteria was that they must be city residents, of which that is plausible. You should be city residents. But they look more at the demographics as opposed to, for lack of a better word, skill, expertise. So if you're going to have some type of board that will be making decisions on human relations, discrimination type issues, all of them don't have to have all that expertise, but some of them, it would be helpful. If you have a legal background, if you have historic background, if you were a local, if you, have contracting and purchasing background, just something that lends itself beyond just being a citizen that lives in a community. One of the things that I find, and I think it's awesome, I'll list what they felt like were some of the key things for people to have in terms of being a part of this commission. But I think that you're asking volunteers to lead each other. And that can be a daunting task if you have people who have never been a part of a commission. So training is key. I took over as interim equity and inclusion director in end of July. So I had little time to kind of get everything sorted out, but we're still working on that. And they needed, I think it would have been great if they could have had some major training. Like, what does this look like? Let's talk to I think you're going to have the North Carolina Human Relations Commission on your meeting today. Have them to come in and talk to them about the activities they do statewide. They were looking in specific for African Americans, Latinx individuals, 2 members of the LGBTQ community, 2 youth members between the ages of 18 and 25, 2 to 3 individuals who live in public housing, 2 individuals with a disability, 3 individuals who are recognized as community leaders. And in that, the disciplines could have been there. You can roll that up into all of that. But when you bring in people who have not had experience either working with government, working with boards, leading meetings, it can be a little daunting for people to be a part of that board. And the things that they were charged with doing they're broad, so they can include a lot of stuff. And I think they're still trying to figure out who they're going to be when they grow up. So we have the city manager meeting with them next week, and I'll be meeting with the city manager to kind of talk about ways in which we can take them into a good direction to kind of give them some starting point, some next level marching orders. Because one city manager set it up, now we have a new city manager. So that's a little bit much for them as well. So I hope that helps.
It is helpful. How has the HRC evaluated progress, or how do you plan to evaluate progress? And has there been any assessment of whether or not the scope needs to change with respect to the HRC?
So we're in the process as a city of looking at all boards and commissions. We have some ideas around, because we have quasi-judicial, so that's your planning and zoning, board of adjustment, historic resources. There's specific boards that need urban forestry commission. There's specific boards that work around development, tree preservation, things of that nature. For these advisory boards, there's a move forward to kind of help support them having more access to city council. They have not assessed their progress that I know of. We are planning a work session in October with the North Carolina Human Relations Commission. And as part of that, we will include training by our city clerk's office to talk to people about how to serve on boards, what kind of things you can and cannot do. Now, this particular board does have the support of our legal office. We have a legal representative to come, but we really want to build capacity in the folks who are members of our board. So I cannot stress enough, training them, talking to them about their mission, giving them maybe some things to work on. They're going to connect with the city manager next week, and I think that should help them. But, to not put too fine a point on it, most people don't know how to run meetings, and they don't know how. These are public meetings. So as such, you cannot come to a public meeting and start talking about a subject you did not notice. We've had a lot of that go on. So we're at a point where we're, really trying to structure them. The last meeting went pretty well, and we're really trying to structure them on, from your work plan, these are the things you say you want to work on this year, next year, year after. What does that look like in terms of success? What are kind of some objectives to get you there? We're still having to do a lot of that.
How did you develop the work plan? How did the HRC develop that work plan?
We're going to. They don't have one. So that's part of the issue at this time. I actually sat in on their work plan. I want to say they were supposed to have a work plan meeting in April. And then there was because this is a highly charged subject matter. It just is. It affects a lot of people's lives. We've got reparations going on. It's got a lot of what people consider are injustices. And so everybody brings to this table as a member what they're passionate about. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they have to come as a group, understand there's a common goal that they have to reach. And eventually the issues that are a concern to them will get addressed. And so what we're going to do with a work plan is talk to them about board service. We have members, I believe there's at least 2 members who join who have never shown up to the meeting. So I've got the task of trying to figure out, did they not know when to meet, and I don't know how most of you feel about this. Most people have no idea how government works. They just don't. And I always get kind of tickled because if I join something, which I don't join a lot of stuff, I get asked, but I don't join. I'm going to read up on that board before. Now, you can't read everything and you can't know everything, but most people don't even know when the board meets. And so we really need to kind of really take just a little couple of steps back, help them understand how the board service works. And then there is training. I'm going to be talking with the North Carolina Human Relations Council and our local folks. Trying to describe it. So, we all have issues with each other. So, Black women maybe have issues with white women, Hispanics and, used to be Black people and Jews, now it's Black people and Hispanic people. And those dynamics are going on as well. And then when you ask people in a local government or local area to really lead a meeting, it's difficult for them. Some of them have personal issues with each other. So we're going to really try to work on that dynamic. And then, if you can't resolve that, then what we may have to do is kindly ask you to consider, is this the board you want to be on? Like, is there something else that you'd be better suited on? Because we want our community to come and trust that if they bring a matter to you, that it will be adjudicated in a fair, objective manner. And right now, I don't think our community thinks that. And I want them to be respected for what they bring to the table. So,
Brenda, what are some of the factors that are considered within Asheville in selecting HRC members? But building on what you just shared, what are some of the questions that you think should be considered in selecting HRC members based on your experience in Asheville?
We ask people why they want to join. I have not had privilege to read all their applications. The clerk's office is putting all those together for me. Our process, it's not bad. I do think we need to go back to interviewing. I think one of the processes for doing this particular board is an interview, to really ask why people want to be a part of this, what they can add to this. Because then, if I come to an interview and I'm like, wow, I didn't know it was going to be like that, or I didn't realize it was, some people don't, I know this sounds crazy, but some people are not used to going to meetings. So you have a monthly meeting, and while it seems like 4 weeks is a long time, it's not. To turn around to come back and to attend a meeting that is, an hour and a half to 2 hours once a month is a lot. It's, people with families and children and all kinds of stuff. And then I think interviewing with council, and then they being able to ask council, where are they seeing Human Relations Commission going, would be great. The background they bring, it's not necessary that you have to have, like a degree or anything else, but speaking to the objectives of this commission, something you bring needs to support that in a way that you can add value to that. So, yeah.
If I could just ask one more question. So a lot of what you've shared, if I'm hearing you correctly, is sort of aimed at this gap between expectations versus the reality of the scope of the commission. What are some of the things that may have led to that gap or fed that gap? And what are you doing now to attempt to close that gap?
So the Equity Office, of course, is liaison to 2 boards. They are liaison to Human Relations Commission. one of their staff people, the policy analyst who we're going to get ready to hire, left in January. So that's been a big loss for them, because continuity is important to any board, that you have staff who's able to keep you updated, work with the clerk's office, work with the chair and the vice chair to make sure, members are attending, members get information. Other thing is that we have created boards and we do need to start scheduling check-ins. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's, 3 council members showing up at their meeting to kind of talk with them about what they're doing, where they see themselves going, that kind of thing. So, these meetings are all public. So, the whole council could show up. But I think they've been left to themselves. If you understand what I'm saying. Just like with most boards. But in this case, with this board, we're dealing with higher level issues that are very serious in our community. And I think they all mean well. They all want to make contributions. I just think we have to help them learn how to do that in a way that is respectful of each other, respectful of the public, respectful of the process. So. And then this office, our director left last year. Our policy analyst got an awesome opportunity in Gainesville, Florida. She works with the city of Gainesville doing EEOC work. Our training consultant who did all of our training for internal and external for equity, she wants to go into social work, and she is managing this family justice center. And then our third person, who is just an amazing community person, she got a great opportunity in Knox County, Tennessee. So when you hire young people, they're going to have 10 jobs before, they finish their career. Didn't expect it to happen all in a chain of events, but that's the way it is. So we'll be hiring staff. There'll be a staff specifically dedicated to that person. We're going to be looking for someone who has had significant experience working with boards and then support that person in doing the work. So I, as interim director, will continue to attend these meetings and help support the work that they are doing.
Brenda, I think it's fair to say you've been incredibly forthright and transparent. And so
trying to be nice
to acknowledge that. I want to be sure to acknowledge that. And before we let you go, I just want to ask our elected officials, are there any additional follow-up questions that you would like to ask Brenda before we close this portion of the presentation?
Hi, this is the chair of the committee. I really appreciate your honesty and candor and giving us some of, the balancing act. This gives us a great deal to process and it sounds like clarity and communication and consistent training. We've been working on that with our other boards, authorities, and commissions, and I think that we might be able to, as we put together a Human Relations Commission, improve on things for our other boards and commissions as well.
And don't forget about your staff people, because I know we have over 35 boards, and some of our staff people feel like they get beat to hell by the board members, by our elected officials. I mean, I don't think the intent is to do that, but you're caught in the middle trying to make things happen. And you all know people sometimes join boards for their own personal agendas, not necessarily the mission of the board. And so most of the boards that I have been liaison for, the last board was neighborhood advisory. We lost 2 people right off because you got to work. If I'm going to be your liaison, you're going to get to work. I mean, we got work to do as a team. I'm out. We have 150 neighborhoods. I need your support, getting out in neighborhoods, doing whatever. We're going to start doing that with our Human Relations Commission as well. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I appreciate that. We had put up sort of, I mean, just by the simplest things of what makes an open records, following open records, starting with the simplest of stuff. And making sure, like you say, what you talk about was on the agenda, what was posted. Yeah. And so it's a lot of training. And you're right. We have to have people on there that are ready to embrace the process and then branch out from there.
Right.
With it. I really appreciate. Does any other committee members want some honest feedback from Brenda?
Yeah.
No, I wanted to just say I appreciate your honesty more than, not more than anybody, but I appreciate it because that's the type of person I am too. You said several things that resonated with me is to remember staff as we're going through this as commissioners. I think that is so significant. The other thing you said that resonated with me about people coming on board with these personal agendas, and I think when we interview people for other boards and they don't even know what what it entails, they haven't even read it.
Right.
That should be a red flag right there.
Yeah.
But the personal agendas and a respect for staff, I think we as commissioners need to take that to heart. And I'm sorry there's only 3 of us on, but maybe it can get reported because out of everything I've heard today, those 2 things, and also the training. We can't expect people to come on board. Sometimes we have our own personal agendas on why we want certain people to be on board.
Yeah.
Because they just mimic and parrot what we want. But we need to train people so they can think for themselves and make good recommendations and training objectively. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I was so happy. I was like, oh, I get to get rid of a board. And then when I took this job, I was like, oh yeah, they have 2 boards. And it was something as simple. We are on publicinput.com. I don't know if you've heard about that software. They built this as we were going, moving through the virtual world. But their meetings have not even been public. And I did not know that. And so tonight will be their first really public meeting. It'll be on Public Input. We will stream it to YouTube. And then we will take live call-in because, of course, we've had to back down a little bit with meetings in person because of the Delta variant and just, how the pandemic's going, and helping people to really understand this is a public meeting. Like, people have the right to hear what you are talking about and that you must stay on that topic. And if something comes up, there's always a place at the bottom of the agenda for informal discussion or maybe future agenda items to talk about, things we want to talk about for the future, but not to get into that because people haven't had a chance to kind of formulate questions or ask about things. And so all of these folks and all these folks on human relations are good people. It's just trying to get them to work as a team. I don't know if you've seen this, you guys are elected officials. All of you are great individuals. Getting you to work as a team takes time. Because you're there for your personal agendas too. So,
you're wise with experience and knowing that we need to hear this. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anytime I can help again, please don't hesitate to call me. Crystal knows how to get out with me. We're gonna be staying in touch.
Yeah, I appreciate you your time now and what I perceive will be in the future when we call up on your experience and insights. Carol, you okay with us moving to the next one?
Yeah, I'm good right now.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Talk to you soon, Crystal.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Okay, Lillian and Commissioner, could you pronounce your last name for me, please?
Sorry, I'm not used to this platform. I was trying to find mute. You can call me Jasmine. My name is Jasmine Beach Ferrara.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jasmine. And welcome to the world of WebEx. We're glad that you chose to join us today. So to our elected officials, this is our final locality for the day. And as was the case with Raleigh, Atlanta, and Asheville, Buncombe County is yet another locality that was willing to take the time out to talk with us, to connect with us, and quite literally on an extremely tight turnaround in this instance, Lillian was willing to help to coordinate this conversation today. This conversation is going to be a little bit different from our prior three, because this conversation is designed to address some of the questions you've had with respect to the non-discrimination ordinance specifically. And so we have three questions prepared. And the first is, what were your top priorities in passing your non-discrimination ordinance?
Well, first of all, let me just say hi and how appreciative I am of this opportunity to connect with y'all. I'm a big fan of the area that y'all represent, and always excited to have conversations like this across jurisdictions. I'll keep this brief, but there's a bit of sort of context that's, I think, important to understand about NDOs in North Carolina and what we did in Buncombe County, which is that the conversation about this actually started many years ago here. I would track it back to probably at least a decade. And became a highly politicized at the state, national, and even global level during 2016 when North Carolina passed HB 2, and then in relatively quick fashion passed a bill called HB 142, which imposed a moratorium on local communities passing non-discrimination ordinances. Going back a decade, what had animated and brought this issue to the table from the perspective of the LGBTQ community and other minority communities was a desire to codify as many levels of protection as possible, and particularly for the LGBTQ community, which I'm a member of, a desire to see local communities take action to reflect locally held values around equality and equity, as we saw a climate in which state governments were not moving in that direction and the federal government was not ready to either. So that's a little bit of the history and context. In North Carolina and Buncombe County, we were able to basically reintroduce this conversation in December of last year when that state bill, HB 142, sunsetted the provision which had prohibited these NDOs. And in quick fashion, a statewide campaign rolled out through which 12 communities across the state, including Buncombe County, have now passed non-discrimination ordinances. And really see the purpose of these, as I spoke to briefly, kind of playing a couple different roles. One is that in a context in which folks have very little protection under state and federal laws, although that's certainly shifting under the Bostock ruling and could shift dramatically if the Equality Act passed, this does provide some measure of protection and recourse around the reporting, addressing, and a means to address incidents of discrimination that are found to have occurred. The other piece of this is around the sort of expression of community values and the teaching effect that we believe any kind of policy, ordinance, or law has in terms of just sort of addressing, not just the values a community holds, but also who lives within that community and their comfort level and sort of fully participating in the life of a community.
Jasmine, if I could ask a follow-up question that's connected to that. Would you be willing to describe the relationship between Buncombe County's passing an NDO and the city of Asheville passing an NDO?
Absolutely. We were really thrilled to work with the city of Asheville on really shoulder to shoulder with linked arms on this initiative and have been able to do that across quite a few issue areas in the last couple of years. And it felt important to do so. At this point, no other municipalities in Buncombe County have joined on. One municipality passed a resolution kind of endorsing the values of this, but not taking the step of an ordinance. We worked fairly closely at the level of staff and elected officials, and then obviously being in dialogue with community groups around this in the development of and the passage of the city ordinance and the county ordinance. And there was a lot of sausage making in the process. The city, as you probably just heard, has an HRC in place. The county does not. And so there were some, we ended up structuring both ordinances to be enforced at the staff level to try to create as much coherence and overlap between the two so that they basically were one and the same ordinance providing direction around these issues.
How are you educating your community on the impact or the intended impact of the passage of the non-discrimination ordinance?
Yeah, great question. Well, through a range of different methods, for a part of the community, there's a long history and context around this, and the and for folks advocating for the passage of the NDO, which was primarily local civil rights and advocacy groups. In my other day job, I'm a minister who runs an LGBTQ advocacy group, so I was sort of wearing two hats in this process. A lot of the education that needed to happen was really around some of the technical aspects of what could and could happen at the level of a local ordinance. We, in Buncombe County, we added protections around natural hair and hairstyles. And there was an opportunity for some education around why that's important and around sort of how provisions like the Crown Act are circulating around the country. There was an opportunity to do some education around sort of how the Bostock Supreme Court ruling and the discussion around the Equality Act in Congress intersected with this. And then, of course, at the broader community level, there were a range of opportunities and needs for dialogue and education. We did a long period of outreach and dialogue with the Chamber of Commerce. That included sort of ongoing dialogue with their VP of policy, a sort of intimate sit down with some key leaders as the ordinance was being drafted, including letting them see the draft and kind of having real discussion about that. And then after the passage of the draft, we organized with the chamber a roundtable discussion that I was able to participate in, as well as an attorney who's working at the state level around this, to basically be a Q&A and sort of a primer. Both county and city attorneys also participated in that. And the goal was that local businesses would feel fully equipped and informed. The reality is most are already complying by virtue of their practices, but there certainly was a desire and need in the business community for folks to feel like they really understood what this meant and particularly understood the enforcement piece. And there was some myth busting to do around that again relates to the sort of legislative history that we're shadowed by, specifically around use of public restrooms and the HB2 kind of debacle that unfolded around that. We also worked hard to make this a very public conversation at County Commission. I think we addressed this at 4 public meetings prior to actually taking a vote on it. And that was deliberate and by design to create a lot of opportunities for dialogue and discussion at the elected body level, public comment. There was reporting on it in the community through that process. And then prior to the vote, 3 of us on commission held sort of an open lunch and learn that was open to anyone in the community. We ended up having sort of maybe between somewhere like 30 some participants. And in that space saw probably the greatest diversity of perspectives, including some folks who are very staunchly opposed to the NDO. So there was a dialogue space around that. And there was also certainly a both in terms of people supportive of and opposed to the NDO, fairly concerted organizing that happened in terms of public comment and outreach to electeds that we, I think different people on County Commission were responsive to different degrees, but there was a pretty high volume of public comment in that regard. The final track is that parallel to that, we did some fairly involved outreach to folks in the community of homeless service providers. Under the public accommodation section of our NDO, homeless shelters and service providers were covered. And we wanted to make sure that community of providers in particular felt fully looped in and informed and had a chance to get their questions asked. And we saw that the vast majority of them were already adhering to the principles of the NDO and excited about its passage, but there was some pushback from some other shelters.
Thank you. This is extremely helpful. What steps are you taking to operationalize your non-discrimination ordinance?
Great question. And I certainly would want to bring Lillian into the conversation here. Our staff has done a tremendous job really building not just the enforcement scheme, but how that will be staffed, how that will be communicated. Lillian and our county attorney did an excellent presentation right before the ordinance went live on July 1st about sort of the portal that lives on the county website and the range of ways through which people could report an incident and how that process works. And I'll turn things over to Lillian for anything you want to add in terms of that context.
Yeah, I think I shared the website with Crystal, and so I'm sure she shared it out. So people can report online. They can, fill out a form. They can come in and report. We have forms available at our libraries, so people have access to them throughout the county services. And we're currently hiring someone to oversee that program. Since the NDO was passed, we've received one report, and it was it didn't qualify, so it was not. It didn't go any further than being reported and then us following up with them and letting them know that what they're reporting didn't fall under the NDO. So from a staffing standpoint, and we had heard kind of the same anecdotal information from Orange County, that the number of reports that they were receiving wasn't really cumbersome for staff. So it was something that was easy to operationalize and bring into the work portfolio without creating a number of stressors, or how do we add this in? It's easy to operationalize.
Be willing to share a little bit more about the staffing piece that you've mentioned? What does that look like?
So this person is going to not only oversee the responses to the NDO, but also serve as kind of an office administrator role. So it will be reporting to the county manager, but also kind of a dotted line to our new chief equity and human rights officer, which is a new position that we are also currently hiring for. So it will have some duties both under the county manager umbrella and then also with the chief equity and human rights office. This was a office administrator position that had been vacated that we repurposed for that.
Thank you so much to each of you. Is there anything else that you think it might be helpful for us to keep in mind as we move forward with the implementation of our non-discrimination ordinance?
If you're open to just kind of sharing what the current landscape feels like, and if it feels like there's any particular challenges or hurdles you're encountering.
I think this might be a good opportunity to open the floor to our elected officials.
Crystal, I saw you coming our way with that one. So I appreciate this dialogue and your all's input on this. I think for me, and one of the reasons we separated our non-discrimination ordinance mission for the committee from the educational toolbox, so to speak, is that we didn't want to slow down getting the ordinance passed, which we did unanimously, with how are we going to communicate it and how do we inform the community and how does we make the reporting. Crystal saw how we currently have right now the only discrimination type thing before the non-discrimination ordinance was linked to alcohol license, because we had this dress code thing going on downtown, or the private party thing of screening people or discriminating about who comes in. So anyway, she looked at how we have that set up to report, and I think convoluted maybe was a word that I came away with. So learning how to let the community know the reporting mechanism and improving ours, I think is still in the works, but information on that is important to me.
I just had a question. Could you repeat again, what is the role of the process going through or to our county manager? Did I hear something like that about what's the role of the county manager in this process?
Lillian, correct me if I've got this wrong, but basically the county within Buncombe County, an appeal could be made to the county manager.
Okay.
But the investigation and the findings and I should have mentioned this earlier. We really did try to structure this and we'll implement it in the spirit of education, conciliation, and mitigation, much more so than trying to direct this towards the sort of punitive fine-based measures.
Okay.
And built within that sort of due process of the investigation and findings, there is an appeal process, and that can go to the county manager's office.
Yeah, the appeal panel is the county manager, staff attorney, strategic partnerships director. So that's who would have the final appeal if there's not the ability for reconciliation. The other thing is any fees that are garnered as a result of an NDO, those go to our school systems.
So with the actual, I guess, negotiation, mitigation, that would vary case by case, basically.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Carol. You're muted, I think, Carol. Carol? I think you're muted. You there?
Yeah, the screen wasn't coming up, so I couldn't unmute myself. I just wanted to clarify something. Is your NDO was just passed then a couple of months ago?
Correct.
Okay. So, and then Lillian, I just looked at the website that you guys have. I think it's really nice and clear. I'm really impressed by it. So I looked at that just now, which is why I wasn't on this screen. But on that, are you saying the one complaint, for lack of a better word, that you've gotten didn't even get started in the process because it didn't fall under the NDO?
Correct. It was a mask complaint. So
okay. And so you have in that NDO, you mentioned a non-discrimination coordinator position.
Mm-hmm.
And where is that housed in the government?
So for us, that's that office administrator that I was talking about that we've repurposed. So they'll still be doing some of those same administrative duties of scheduling and that sort of thing, but they are also overseeing when a report comes in, getting the ball rolling, working on this process. So they will be doing both the office administrator function and this.
And what department title is that?
In the county manager's office.
Or the county manager's office. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the other thing is in your process, it mentions an investigator. Is the investigator someone separate from the coordinator?
No, they're the same.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. But it's very clearly laid out.
Thank you. You are welcome to steal anything you want or borrow anything you want from the website that you wish.
Crystal, you heard that, did you? They're ready.
Yes, ma'am.
Committee, or Crystal, did you have more from all the work you've done getting our speakers today? And we really do appreciate your all's time, and we may be getting back with you as we move forward to try to get our committee or commission put together and make it as good as it possibly can based on the experiences you guys have had as helps.
Well, thank you so much for reaching out. We'd love to stay in dialogue, and thanks for all the leadership and work y'all are doing on this.
The only thing, Commissioner Myers, is just to say thank you again. It really does mean a great deal to us as a locality that you were willing to take time out of your schedule to connect and share your experiences. So truly, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime. Thank you all. Have a great
Bye.
one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wait a minute. Crystal, I think you're muted.
I did it. I was bound to do it at some point. Assistant Manager Jones just wanted to, say thank you to everyone. We know that this was a different style of meeting, but we are hopeful that this information was helpful and meaningful to you as we continue through this 60-day process, and to express appreciation to everyone, but the manager's office as well, in particular, for being willing to collaborate with us so closely as we develop and build this out. So Assistant Manager Jones, just want to turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you for that, Crystal. So I think that was a great process today. I hope everyone learned a lot, and please go back and review this presentation, this video again. If you may have missed some tidbits, there's a lot of really good information from everyone. Crystal, thank you for setting everything up. The last meeting, Crystal mentioned that it would be good at the very end of the meeting to kind of make sure we touched on what we heard today, what you guys kind of final thoughts, if you will, and how we should carry those final thoughts over to the next meeting. So I think if we can take the next 5 to 10 minutes to be able to do that, I think that would be super helpful in informing the next meeting as well.
Okay. Committee, Carol, you want to go first? Tell give us a little summary so that we're on target for where we want to be next Thursday as far as the discussion?
Well, had moved from my office, so I don't have that wonderful list that Nikki had made for us. What was the next thing on that, like, your great plan that you had for us?
He's digging it up, I think. Nikki, I think you're muted again. There you go.
The next meeting is kind of talking about the framework, right? It's the skeleton, if you will, and then subsequent meetings would be putting meat on the bones.
Okay, for what I came out of from today, and I'm glad you mentioned reviewing the whole thing again, because I'm like, I think I learned a lot here in terms of it's things to think about in terms of who would make up the council, some kind of the training and the support that's needed. And, you know, I can reiterate that what was helpful and what could have been helpful in other community committees that I've been on and commissions. I found myself going back to, and this might be you know, I just need further education coming on this later than others of you. Really what the scope of the commissions was in terms of communicating that clearly and effectively to the commission, but knowing that ourselves. I know one of those slides at the beginning when we were learning about Raleigh, I was like, oh man, I looked down too soon. I didn't read everything on that of what was covered, like what I thought that was really helpful, what the HRC had actually done in the last year. And so I don't, it's something personally I need to be better informed of what the scope and mission is. You know, when they were talking about members of the committee not, you know, bringing their own personal agendas and such, one has a clear scope and mission to give people, and it's easy to go back to that. If the scope and mission are too vague, and people can fit whatever they want in there. So it's more in terms of the scope and the work that I need more help with.
So next meeting, we'll also be talking about scope. I failed to mention that. So it's the framework of the HRC, but also the scope. And I think those two go hand in hand. So, you know, the scope, you're right, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. It's actually what helps inform the framework. That's what we need to talk about. That's what we need to flesh out. I think Crystal's going to be able to facilitate that. And, you know, I know she's going to be able to facilitate that. I know that there's got to be some work in between this meeting and next meeting, right? And we can send you information, any information that you need to help inform those decisions. But again, this tight timeline is, you know, next meeting, we're going to be talking about scope and frame. So whatever you need from us, just let us know. We can send you Raleigh's HRC scope. We can send you Asheville, Atlanta's HRC scopes. That might help you all.
That's exactly the direction I was going with, Nikki, is that since we heard from these groups, let's see what it looks like on paper, you know, as far as its scope and mission or that kind of overall, because I think you're right. Once we have a good dialogue about the scope and the mission, then we're going to be able to get the details of how we get who and then training for who. I do like the idea of this commission having a work plan, an annual work plan that gets approved by the mayor and commission. I think that's a good checkpoint because it also goes well with Brenda's talking about making sure people, the group stays on task in that respect. But that's a little deeper than we need right now. But just from hearing today, it seems that checkpoint is good. Avita, what are you thinking for our next meeting?
I totally am agreeing with scope, and I mean, listening to the presenters, this is really bigger than I really had. It's bigger than what I think I signed on for. So I guess my concern would be is that when we're looking at scope, we're realistic in what we can do. As we develop that scope, we do not need to go like pie in the sky, you know, it's all or nothing right now. Maybe as we develop the scope, maybe we can have tiers of where we're going to reach each milestone, because this is really much bigger than the protected class that we were kind of talking about, or I was talking about. Maybe you already knew it was going to be bigger. And I say that because all the presenters were great, because they gave me something to think about. They gave me some things I had questions about, and they gave me some things that I totally agree with. But one of the things that I noticed that all of them, except for maybe Atlanta, seemed to have some turnover in their staffing. And so that makes me wonder, are we just preparing people for bigger and better things, or was something, or did they bite off more than they could chew at the beginning? So, I'm one that rather take it moderately until we jump into it. And now that I've heard the presenters, this is much bigger than I thought, but I think they gave us some good guidance. And I'll just depend on Nikki and Crystal to direct us based on everybody else's comments.
Okay, I think that's a good point too, that we are the starting point for this project, and that we can get it going. And if we do have this annual approach to the Merit Commission with a work plan, that this group that we get together as a beginning group can also be helping formulate the tiering of from the mission and the statement as we go along. Carol, I kind of interrupted you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just actually had a follow-up request, which is very concrete. And maybe it's too much. Well, actually it's helpful for me, so I'm not gonna be negative on myself here. But if you're giving us examples of scopes from other places, could you possibly, in addition, put them into, like, if a scope is to respond, one of the things is to respond to the NDO, another one to do education, like to sort of put those in a spreadsheet with, like, here are all the possible ones, and here's what Raleigh does these do these, so we can see what's out there, how much might be too much, and just sort of do that work for us to help us move us ahead a little bit faster.
Bullet points, spreadsheet, either way, just make it really simple about what everyone does.
Yeah, and is everybody good that we stick with this grouping that we just heard from today and not have staff trying to reach out for other examples? Because I think this was a good snapshot. I think this is a good group for us to continue to learn more from as we make our own version. Is that okay with the committee?
I would not recommend right now reaching out. I think we're asking staff to do a lot right now, just kind of compiling this. Mm-hmm. And I know that my little brain can't take too much if you put it on, like, it'd be like a smorgasbord, trying to eat everything. So if there's something missing, and then we have to look to some, another city or area, that would be good. But I think we have enough right now to at least start, whittling this down.
Okay. All right. I agree. Carol, you're shaking your head. You agree as well?
Yeah, I agree. And unless, if Nikki and Crystal are looking at this, whoever, and like, oh man, there's something missing. Sure, go find something, but use these municipalities or counties as a starting point, as a main point right now.
Okay, all right. So I believe we'll have the three of us committee members for a quorum, and we'll add Commissioner Huell, I think. So we're set for next Thursday to have a quorum. I think we're ready to wrap up unless staff needs another feedback point. What did you need, Nikki?
One last thing, Commissioner Wright. I just want to kind of regurgitate what I heard from y'all. Scope and mission sent to the LRC in between these two meetings.
That's our
Bullet
homework.
points, spreadsheet, something kind of delineating what the scope of each HRC is that we heard from today. Also, I heard kind of three overarching views of what we heard today. Incrementalism. Commissioner Thornton brings up a good point. Let's focus on some core things and then kind of build off of that. Also, work plan. Check-ins with mayor and commission, right? Those would be good as we go forward with the framework and a scope. In addition to that, onboarding. I saw a lot of you all shaking your head when we were talking about capacity, just basic local government knowledge. That is so important to make sure we onboard our new commissioners, incoming commissioners. So we'll kind of be prepared to talk about those things. That's all I have.
Right, and then if you wanted to just copy and paste as a list of the mission/scope of the people who presented today and send that to us while you're percolating more of a comparison. That way we can start our reading homework on that while you guys space out your LRC workload among your other workloads. So I really appreciate you guys moving this forward with us. And we are 3 minutes over. So I'm ready for a motion to adjourn. She was muted, but I read her lips. Carol said motion. Ovita, you ready for Ovita? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. Good job.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Crystal. Great job.
Bye.
Thank
Great
you.
job, Crystal. Thank you.